You know, a lot has happened since we last met. The first ever 1 versus 2 matchup in SEC history, and it happened right here in Alabama. Auburn #1 knocking off Bama 94-85.
Johnson wide open, Tony.
UAB's Tony becoming the winningest scholarship player in program history. He's now been a part of 119 Blazer victories. And how about Samford collecting its 20th win for a 4th straight season, something that had never been done before. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. Hey, to my friends at the Birmingham Tip-Off Club, what a season we are enjoying here, and it just gets better and better. We start with Auburn rolling along this past week with 2 more wins on the hardwood despite not playing its best. Last Wednesday, the Tigers hold off Arkansas 67-60, after which head coach Bruce Pearl proclaimed this.
We're trying to play for a championship, and the other thing we're trying to do is we got a chance to set a record for the most quad 1 wins in a regular season. This team has got a chance, if we can finish it the right way, to be one of the best teams in the history of college basketball in the regular season.
That is followed up with Auburn beating Georgia 82-70 this past Saturday. The Tigers are now 25-2 on the season and play Ole Miss and at Kentucky this coming week. As for Alabama, the Tide went on the road last week to start off and ran into a red-hot Missouri club, Bama losing 110-98. But the Tide responded and rebounded at home against Kentucky 96-83 this past weekend behind Mark Sears' 30 points.
He's as coachable as he's ever been, and his effort on defense has been through the roof.
Just going out there playing hard on defense and playing with effort, and just playing with urgency.
Bama is 22-5, plays Mississippi State next, and then a road trip to Tennessee on Saturday. As for UAB, the Blazers had a nice week, first getting the W against Rice 90-89. And then yesterday, UAB taking care of business against Temple 80-64. The Blazers are looking good at 18-9. Let's take a look at the SEC from this past weekend. Chaz Lanier drops a game-high 30 points and 8 3-pointers to keep Tennessee's offense firing in a gritty 77-69 road win over Texas A&M. Arkansas gets a huge quad 1 victory as the Razorbacks grind out a tough victory against Missouri 92-85. South Carolina gets off the schneid as the Gamecocks defeat Texas 84-69, earning its first conference win of the season. 5 Florida players scored in double digits as the Gators take down LSU in Baton Rouge 79-65. Vanderbilt snaps a 3-game slide, building a 19-point lead, then holds off for an important 77-72 win over visiting Ole Miss. Freshman Jeremiah Fears records 25 points and 10 assists against Mississippi State as the Oklahoma Sooners upset the Bulldogs 93-87. Back around the state, Samford takes care of business on Senior Day, beating Western Carolina 93-72. The Bulldogs improve to 21-8. Jacksonville State continues to play well as the Gamecocks get the better of UTEP 73-65. JSU is now 19-8. Alabama A&M had its moments but couldn't come back against Bethune-Cookman, losing 68-64. Miles College has won 11 straight games and is atop the SIAC standings. The Golden Bears are 21-3 overall, 17-1 in league play. What about North Alabama? The Lions now tied for first in the Atlantic Sun. Women's play from yesterday.
Hunter launches.
Auburn with a fast start, but Bama finishes strong. The Tide hold off the Lady Tigers 66-50 in the state rivalry. And a reminder, the state high school Final Four tournament is now underway at Legacy Arena. 56 teams are vying for 14 blue maps. Just to name a few of the schools that are in our area that are playing, for the first time, the Mountain Brook girls are in the Final Four. The Sylacauga boys have advanced, so has the Chelsea girls, and both the boys and girls teams from Hoover High School. If you love hoops, and I know that you all do, now is your fun time. We'll see you next Monday with another recap.
I think he did leave out. Coach Nate Oates.
Recording in progress.
We had a huge crowd for Coach Oates. I think it was over 170 people in the room. So, and we want to thank Kevin Skarbinski for really helping to make that happen and get Coach Oates here. We also, at that meeting, announced our exciting partnership with the Lakeshore Foundation, and we're looking forward to seeing what comes out of that project. We also honored our Player of the Week, who was Ashlyn Howard from Hewitt-Trussville, and on the way to UAB to play with the women's program there. Since we last met, we also had our squadron night, which was a big success. We had close to 40 people there that night. We enjoyed a wonderful meal, had premium seats. We actually heard a few words from Coach TJ Saint pregame, and that was a treat as well. So I want to thank everybody that helped put that together. Ken Roden was our committee chair. Of course, Leslie Claybrook is the squadron GM and is on our tip-off board. We wanted to thank everybody that helped put that together. Michelle McIntyre, our executive director, was always involved, and Nick Weldon from the squadron, also a member of our club. So thanks to all of you for making that squadron night a special night. We got a nice picture of everybody at the end of the evening and had a great time. Also, late last week, I hope you got the email, but real exciting to see that Coach Dawn Staley is coming to Birmingham. And that's a couple of leading companies in town that are bringing her. Maynard Nexon and Brasfield and Gorey are bringing Coach Staley to town. Of course, she's won 3 national titles at South Carolina, one of the great coaches in all of sport. And she will be here on the evening of March the 12th at the Lyric Theater. And if you're a paid member of the Tip-Off Club, that's one of the benefits. We are fortunate to be invited to that event, and I encourage you to respond quickly, and it'll be a huge crowd, I'm sure, to hear her. And the timing couldn't be better as we lead in to the women's regional right down the street at Legacy Arena in about 30 days. So check that email, and if you didn't get one, let me know. But if you're a member of the Tip-Off Club, that's one of the benefits, and we hope you will join us for that great night at the Lyric Theater in downtown. Okay. We're looking forward today to a great meeting. Our featured speaker, Garth Glissman. We're great to have you with us, Garth. He's the Associate Commissioner of Men's Basketball for the SEC, and he is riding high right now. As you know, the entire college basketball world is talking about SEC men's basketball, and the consensus is it's the greatest league in the history of college basketball on the men's side. And Garth's going to tell us today how we got there, and we look forward to hearing from him. We also have 2 distinguished guests from the Alabama High School Athletic Association. We're going to talk state finals, which is underway as we speak, and we look forward to hearing from those 2 gentlemen. Nothing like the state tournament, and we've been involved. It's an honor to provide some volunteer support for that event, and we're doing that again this year. Many of you are team hosts. Many of you are helping with hospitality, and club member Jimmy Carlson reminds me that it'd be great if we could wear our badges while we're working at the tournament. So if you're involved as a volunteer, take your badge with you and wear it while you're down at the tournament this week. The first game, I believe, was overtime, so we're off to a great start, and there's nothing like the state finals. When you think about an overtime game, you've got one team that's in tears, the other is just ecstatic, and 2 more running on the court. So that goes on all week long. You don't even have to like basketball to enjoy. There's so much emotion and energy in that arena. I encourage you to get by and watch. I know many of you will. Our Alabama Power Speaker Series continues. Next week, we have the return of our panel from the NCAA Men's Basketball Committee. You know, Garth, it's amazing to us that 3 of the 12 members of the committee resided within 60 miles of Birmingham for the last 2 years. Charles McClellan has rotated off, but we, by popular demand, have asked him to come back again. So he'll be here with Martin Newton and Greg Byrne. And again, that's 11 days before Selection Sunday. We're going to have 3 members of the selection committee. Kevin, you're not going to get that in Kentucky or North Carolina or Indiana, but you are going to get it in Birmingham, Alabama. So
Only in Alabama.
3rd year in a row that we're going to have those 3 gentlemen with us, and we can grill them and see what they're thinking right ahead of the selection show. But we appreciate Alabama Power for helping us with our speaker series again this year. We have one special guest I'd like to introduce. I think he wins the award for coming the greatest distance to a tip-off club meeting. Brent Wolf, if you'd stand over here. Brent's from South Bend, Indiana. Great to have you with us. And now I'll ask Greg Johnston to come forward for our invocation and pledge. Greg is a tip-off club member and is the past chair of the Lakeshore Foundation Board of Directors and continues to serve on that board, and it's great to have Greg with us.
Y'all join me in prayer. Lord, we're thankful for this day, for the opportunity that we have to gather here and have fellowship with others who enjoy this great sport of basketball. Father, we're thankful for the meal that we have enjoyed, and we ask you to bless those who prepared it and served it. Father, we pray for the leaders of our country and our state and our city. Give them wisdom and compassion as they make decisions that will impact all of our futures. Lord, we're thankful to be your children, and we ask that you give us opportunities to be your hands and feet in this community. And in your Son's name we pray. Amen. If you'll stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Greg. And I should have mentioned this earlier, but our speaker, Garth Glissman, has graciously asked that he's declined our honorarium and asked that we direct it to the Lakeshore Foundation. So, Greg, if you'll pass the word back to your folks, and thank you so much, Garth, and we look forward to hearing from you. Okay. All right, Kevin Skarbinski's going to get us excited here. Kevin, if you'll come on up.
Don't all applaud at once. Listen, I'm so excited, I've already broken my clipboard, and I didn't even lose to Missouri. I've already seen 1.5 basketball games today, so my juices are flowing. The very first game of the high school state tournament was brilliant, won by brilliant in overtime to get the day tipped off on the right foot. And the first 1A boys semifinal is about over. It looks like Brantley is going to beat Hubbardville. And you know you're a basketball state when you look on the bench of one of the teams, and one of the assistant coaches is the leading scorer in Auburn history, Chuck Person. Did you guys know Chuck Person was an assistant coach at his alma mater, Brantley High School? I didn't know that till today. And they've got a young man named Jaden Parks who has scored 40 or more 5 times this year. Last I checked, with about a minute left, he only had 32. So I guess we'll be seeing Chuck and Brantley and Jaden in the finals. Jaden's dad, Andre, is the head coach. Now look, we've already established that Alabama is a basketball state. But I'm here today to tell you, apologies to my friend from Indiana, that it is the basketball state at this very moment. Now, before you think that an idle boast, of course you know I brought receipts. So we are the only state in America with 2 teams in the top 6 of every advanced metric that the selection committee will study in selecting and bracketing the teams. Of course, that's Auburn at number 1. Alabama in various metrics is anywhere from number 2 to number 6. And somebody's got to reprogram ESPN's BPI computer because that has Auburn 3 and Alabama 6. I don't know what they're thinking with that. Auburn continues to do things that have never been done on the Plains. Bruce Pearl and company, they won their 25th game of the season on Saturday. That is the 6th time in the last 8 years that Auburn has won 25 or more. That's more than any other program in the conference. Tennessee can match that if the Vols, I should say when the Vols win 3 more. That's a pretty amazing statistic, especially when you consider that before Bruce Pearl got to Auburn, you know how many 25-win seasons they had in their entire history? One. 1999, Chris Porter, Doc Robinson, etc., under Cliff Ellis. Alabama, it's harder to do things that have never been done at Alabama because, let's be honest, Alabama has a richer basketball history than Auburn does. But Nate Oates is doing that bit by bit. Beating Kentucky for the second time makes Nate Oates the first coach in Alabama history to sweep the Wildcats twice. Twice. Wimp Sanderson did it once, and C.M. Newton did it once. So that tells you what's happening at Alabama. And oh, by the way, that was the 26th victory over a ranked opponent under Nate Oates. That is now a new Alabama record. Although, in fairness to Wimp, before he gets on me on his radio show in the morning at 7:30, they only had a top 20 for most of Wimp's tenure. They didn't start the top 25 until the last 3 years. So we'll give Wimp a little grace on that one. But it's not just Alabama and Auburn that are doing great things in basketball in this state. There are how many Division I teams in this state? Thank you. Somebody's been paying attention. There are 10 D1 teams in this state. 9 of them have a winning conference record. 9 of them are in the top 3 in their conference. Think about that for a moment. We're in the last week of February. 9 of the 10 teams, Division I teams in this state, are in the top 3 in their league at this moment. That means we have a great chance, if things go right in a lot of conference tournaments, to break the state record of 4 teams in the NCAA tournament at the same time. But records are being set all over. UAB, in the last 5 years under Andy Kennedy, has won more games than in any 5-year period in UAB history. And UAB was coached by a legend named Gene Bartow. That tells you the job that Andy Kennedy is doing. How about Samford? 4 straight 20-win seasons. The most they'd ever had. I think they had 5 20-win seasons in their entire history before Bucky McMillan got there. That tells you what they're doing. Alabama State is on a roll. They've won 4 straight. They've pulled up to 3rd place in the SWAC. There is great basketball everywhere you turn in this state. And I did the numbers again. You add all the conference records of the 10 D1 teams in this state, because you're comparing like to like with conference records. Our winning percentage, those 10 teams in conference, .705. 70%, 71 if you want to round up, wins in conference games. You know where that ranks? Among all 50 states in the country, number 3. You know why it's number 3? Because Vermont only has 1 school and New Mexico only has 2. In the net, 8 of our 10 D1 teams are in the top 126 in the net rankings. 8. You know how many states have more teams in the top 126 of the net rankings? 1. California, which has more than twice as many D1 schools. Do I need to go further, or can I rest my case, Your Honor? This is not just a basketball state. Embrace this moment, folks, because right now, at this time, sorry, Kentucky, go away, North Carolina, this is the basketball state in the United States of America. Was that enough? And now, before they carry me out of here, I'm pleased to welcome a gentleman who's going to continue this basketball tradition at the high school level. We've already seen some great basketball, as I mentioned. And by the way, shameless plug, I'll be here, I'll be there all week long. The semifinals, if you can't get to Legacy Arena, which you should do, but if you can't, you can watch the semifinals on WOTM, shameless plug, or the NFHS network streaming. Starting on Thursday, when we get to the championship games, you can watch every game on Alabama Public Television. So I hope you will do that. And the reason that that event is so popular, it's a forerunner, it's a groundbreaker, it's a pioneer in the United States of America, girls and boys, every class, semifinals and finals, same site, is because of people like our next guest, the executive director of the AHSAA, Please welcome Heath Harmon.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's just great to be in the room with all of you. Anytime I get an opportunity to hear Kevin and in a minute Ron speak in the same day, that's definitely a blessing. Ron will always give us some tidbits on the high school level, or at least that's what I call it, and just some great information. But just want to start by introducing myself. I am the new executive director for the Alabama High School Athletics Association. I am in my 28th year as an educator. I will always consider myself an educator. But I owe really everything that I've done professionally to high school athletics. I grew up in a small community and played for coaches that made sure that they impressed the importance of being the best that you could be, but you did that through the lens of sportsmanship. So that was very important. My high school football coach took a stencil and a black magic marker and put on the door in our locker room, "Enthusiasm is highest in those who are learning and achieving." I have since then tried to see who that quote is attributed to. I'm not sure who that is. But throughout my career, I've also always used that as kind of the check on how things are going. If you see enthusiasm, which you just saw from Kevin here, if you see enthusiasm, that's a really good way to inspect the fruit of your labor. And so I had coaches that poured that into me. My parents, especially my dad, the conversations that we would have often used athletic analogies. We would often talk about leaving a place better than you found it. We would talk about how that you're a part of something bigger than yourself, how you often have to delay gratification. So many times when we're wondering how our youth are doing, and we might be concerned about that, just know that in education-based athletics, they're still doing those things. When I say education-based athletics, that's something that we have to protect because the way that we connect our athletics with our schools, that's very important, and we've got to make sure that we promote and protect that. Teaching and learning is at the foundation of everything that we do. And if you were able to attend the 1A game that kicked us off that went into overtime, I mean, you saw enthusiasm, you saw passion, you saw well-coached teams exhibiting sportsmanship, diving on the floor, hustling, giving it all that they had. It was really a showcase for what we're supposed to have. So just very appreciative. And I want to say thank you. I think that one of the areas that Alabama really excels in is our championship events. Very proud of the opportunity that we provide our student athletes in the championship events. There's no better state basketball tournament than what we have, and you're a big part of that. You know, the history of that, and Ron may talk to us a little bit about that, but bringing all of those together to one site and to be able to do that in Birmingham, we're so happy to be in this great city and great venue in order to bring those together. It's just a first-class tournament, and that doesn't happen by accident. It takes a lot of dedication and behind the scenes. It takes a lot of volunteers. We certainly appreciate that. I am very excited to be in this role. We're going to continue to protect and promote education-based athletics, and you're going to continue to see our young people thrive in that venue and in that environment. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Heath. I love the idea of education-based athletics. Having two sons that played high school basketball and baseball in this state, now are in college, they got a great foundation through the AHSAA. Although my older son did get 2 technicals in a game, he had to take the star sportsmanship course after that. Actually, one of them was my fault since I yelled at the official in Walker County. Don't ever play in Walker County if you don't have to. All right. Now, our next guest. Look, if I've ever written anything you didn't like, blame our next guest. He was my first boss at the Birmingham News. I was an intern there 41 years ago. I started when I was 10. Ron Ingram was the high school sports editor of the Birmingham News. I don't know anyone in this state that knows more history about high school athletics in Alabama than this gentleman. He can not only tell you about Brilliant and McIntosh, which was the first girls' game, he's probably been to both and he can give you directions. Ron Ingram, the communications director of the AHSAA.
McIntosh is just straight down the highway, U.S. Highway 43, after you pass through Jackson and Leroy. If you turn right, you go to Citronelle. If you turn left, you go in the Alabama River. But anyway, Kevin was my first intern, and and we went to a breakfast before we got started, and I told him before we got through he would love high school sports. He already loved it, but I'm going to tell you, he did love it, and I was very fortunate to have him there, and I've been really proud of him. He mentioned Brantley a while ago, a young man from Brantley, Jaden Parks. He's been averaging 34 points a game. His team just probably just won their first game. He mentioned Chuck on the person on the sidelines, but now Jaden comes from great stock. His uncle was a guy named Johnny Seawright. I don't know if many of y'all remember him, but he was at Luverne High School when Charles Cleveland was at Bibb County. The reason I know is because they were at Luverne and Bibb County when I was at Pike County High School. Johnny Seawright did not get an offer in Alabama. He went to an HBCU school, and he ended up being an All-American, ended up being very wealthy. His mother is Jaden's, his sister is Jaden's mother. And a couple of years ago, they came back at Christmas. Her birthday's right around Christmas, and he drove down in a brand new Mercedes, and he's doing really well. But anyway, he told his sister, he says, "You got to drive me back to the airport." And she says, "Well, what you gonna do with your car?" He says, "That's not my car. That's your birthday present." So that Jaden comes from a great stock. He's also probably going to be a baseball draft pick out of high school. He was the quarterback on the football team, and he had 43, I think, in one of his games last week in the regional. Y'all need to go check him out. This is a great time for me because this is when all of our high schools come from all over, and I'm supposed to give y'all a little bit of information. I asked several coaches if there was one player in the tournament that could be on anybody else's team and they could probably win, who would that be? And the answer was pretty quick, Dwayne Brown. He's the center at Hoover High School. They've won 43 straight games with him in the lineup. And they're undefeated this year. We've never had a 7A team undefeated. Coach Scott Ware's done an incredible job. You throw it over to Hoover High School's girls. Crystal Johnson is an amazing coach. But 24 years ago, she was playing in the state championships here. Hoover was playing against Decatur. She went to the foul line with 1 second left, needed 2 free throws to win the state championship. She made them, and let me tell you, she's been doing that ever since. She's just been one of our great young basketball, I say young, she's one of our great basketball coaches. When she was in 6th grade, when I would cover the Birmingham City Schools tournament, she would come out with a mom and dad, and I started using her to keep statistics. And she sent in this year for her team questionnaire a 24-page thing of statistics. I'm proud of her too. We do have teams coming from all over the place, and we've got 8 of our head coaches all went to 1A schools. We've got 11 coaches that are coaching at their alma mater. That's hard to do. And we've got one coach. I do need to mention him. He's probably the coach that just got beat for Hubbardsville, Caleb Hines. He's from Winfield, which is a great basketball city, and he's a great basketball coach. This is the first time Hubbardsville, I think, has ever been to the state tournament, or at least in the last 50 years. But he replaced a man named Lamar Harris. Lamar Harris was the head football coach, the head girls basketball coach, the head boys basketball coach, the head baseball coach, and the head softball coach when he was there. He's in our Hall of Fame. He was an incredible coach. I asked Caleb, I said, "What do you coach?" And he says, "Well, I coach boys and girls basketball." He replaced Coach Harris. "I'm the head coach in football." He said, "They give me the spring off, but I still have to go through spring training with my basketball and my football." But he's learning really well what to do. And Hubbardsville has created some great coaches outside. But every student in that school, if you talk to them and ask who's been the most influential person in their lives, girl or boy, they're probably going to have, if you ask them to name 3, Lamar Harris is going to be in the top 3. We've got a lot of coaches that are going to be on the sidelines coaching at the state championships. We see a lot of great players, but I can tell you, without those great coaches, without their commitment to high school education-based athletics, a lot of these young people would not be able to do the things that they do. We had a young lady from McIntosh that was watching in the stands, and their team that played in the first game this morning. She was the MVP of the state tournament here. She went to Columbia University out of McIntosh, which is really, like I said, a really small school. She had a 34 ACT. Now she's working for the State Department of Education. And you know what she was doing this morning? She was standing up in the bleachers behind her team, the loudest fan they have. That's what education-based athletics is about, and we're so proud of it. I'd love to tell you all the stories. I know there's a lot of stories in here that you just, some will break your heart, some will just fill your heart with just so much. These kids are in such need of formation, and these teams and the successes they have are incredible. Try to get over to see the state championships. If you can't get to the BJCC, turn on the TV, and you get to listen to Kevin in between games, and he'll be giving you some of these tidbits of information that you really want to know about these kids. But I can tell you, you will appreciate how much the communities come and watch the games. This morning when Brilliant was playing, there was nobody left in the town of Brilliant. I guarantee you, nobody. And their former head coach was the bank president there, so he's passed away now, but nobody could come without owing him money either. But anyhow, thank y'all for letting us come. Thank you for letting me come back to Birmingham Tip-Off Club. I love this club. I loved it when I was here, and we do appreciate what y'all do for high school basketball, but more importantly, what you do for our high school students. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Ron. Talking of great high school basketball players, we're about to meet two of them. First, to present our Player of the Week, Wade Kaiser.
Thank you. Player of the Week this week is Peyton Wiggins from Huffman High School. His coach, Steve Ward, couldn't make it today. He is actually calling games at the BJCC. So he's over there on the radio, I believe, today. So we're joined today by Jadarius McRae as assistant coach. But just because Steve's not here, I won't ignore him. He was a former standout at Alabama A&M. Spent the last 15 years coaching at Huffman High School. In 2005, he was the head coach became the head coach at Hayes, and at Hayes, he had the opportunity to coach Eric Bledsoe, who was a decent player. He was okay. Long NBA career. A quick Google search today, I did realize he's playing in the Chinese Basketball Association and was the CBA Club Cup Finals MVP this year. So go figure. But Coach Ward won a state championship with Huffman in 2020. He's won a couple of city championships, 9 area championships, 10 Northeast regionals, 3 Final Four appearances, and has been the Birmingham Tip-Off Club Coach of the Year. So for Peyton, he wrote a big write-up because he couldn't be here, so I'm just going to honestly read it to you because it's really good. Huffman High School standout Peyton Wiggins has solidified his place as one of the greatest players in program history since stepping on the court as an 8th grader. Wiggins has been the driving force behind the Vikings' success, helping lead their team to 4 area championships, 5 Sweet 16s, 3 Elite 8s, and a 6A runner-up appearance. In 2025, Peyton was recognized as 6A Player of the Year finalist, further cementing his legacy as one of the top high school players in Alabama. His on-the-court achievements include surpassing Stanley Robinson as Huffman's all-time leading scorer, a historic milestone. If y'all don't remember Stanley, look him up. He was a player, went to UConn, big-time player. Wiggins has recorded over 2,000 points, along with more than 350 rebounds, 275 assists, showcasing his all-around excellence as a point guard. Beyond basketball, Wiggins has demonstrated outstanding academic achievement. He's a member of the National Honor Society, has a GPA well above 4.0. Reflecting his dedication to excellence in the classroom as well as on the court. He's a once-in-a-generation talent, said Coach Steve Ward. His leadership, work ethic, commitment to success have been instrumental to our program, and his impact will be felt for years to come. As Wiggins prepares for the next chapter of his basketball career, his legacy at Huffman is firmly established. His contributions to the program, both athletically and academically, have set a new standard for future Vikings. Your Player of the Week, Peyton Wiggins.
Thank you. I just want to start this off by saying I give all praise to the man above. I want to thank my coaches, Coach McCray, Coach Ward, even though he can't be here. I want to thank my family. You got those 3 amazing ladies right there. My grandma, mom, and my other grandma. My pops couldn't make it, but I appreciate him. And last, I want to thank the Birmingham Tip-Off Club for this recognition. Thank you.
Peyton, congratulations and best of luck on the next level. We know we will be watching you for a long time to come on the basketball court. Last week, Mark Sears did something special. He scored 35 and 30 in back-to-back games, but he's got nothing on our next presenter, Mr. Bricks and buckets, Jim Conrad.
All right. Gonna look at it a little different way. Colleges are now having special nights. Like, for instance, Alabama had the white out night. They gave out 10,000 T-shirts with Alabama basketball on the front, CNS Bank on the back. I give them a little plug. And they were nice shirts. 10,000 were given out. People seemed to like them. Everybody had fun. Alabama won. The Kentucky fans that were sitting around me dressed in blue liked the T-shirts and said they would take it back and give it to their grandkids. So it's got me thinking, I wonder what other schools are doing for night out kind of things. Well, I got a couple of them I want to mention to you. The Florida Atlantic Owls had Seinfeld night. Kramer showed up. You could get a autographed picture of Kramer, or you could get your picture taken with him. And what this had to do with it, he was handing out little plastic containers that had candy in it. I don't know what that had to do. They also honored their biology department for their work in aqua preservation from golf balls. That's what they said. Now, another one that I've found that I really like is a school from Indiana. Wake up, I know, Taylor University. You familiar with it? Yeah. All right. They are a small Christian college in Indiana, and they have a tradition, a 27-year tradition, of having a silent night. And what they do is on the Friday in December before the week of finals, they have a game, and the way it works is that the crowd, when the game starts, they stay completely silent until their team scores the 10th point. Then they break loose and shout and celebrate, throw confetti, but they do that for the rest of the game. And when the game is over, everybody comes down out of the stands onto the court, and they sing Silent Night. And they're in a league. It's called the Crossroads League. You heard of that? No? Anyway, it's the Crossroads League, and it's composed of schools in the Midwest like them. And Garth, their commissioner of the league does not fine them for going onto the court. All right, I'm going to get into my picks here. I'm going to start out with the loser. I don't know if he's here. Jake Byers. I was afraid of that. He probably knew he was the only pick below 50%. Next, I don't think he's here, Mark Petway, the sheriff of Jefferson County, who you all know. All right, I'm going to go down to somebody I think is here, Greg Jenkins. Greg, you have won the brick. Please come forward. Greg is a client of mine, so he might bring it to me. This is a brick. Congratulations on your brick for the Birmingham Tip-Off Club. And okay. All right, thank you, Greg. All right, now winner, we had a tie. Chris Nix was next to winner, but the overall winner was Frank Bromberg. He only missed two. I tell you what, Garth, I'm going to get you to sign the ball. afterward and get your ball. Yeah, it'd be good to get Commissioner Sankey to sign that. But anyway, okay, that's it for me. Goodbye.
Well, Dick made a reference to it earlier that we are witnessing not only the greatest season in the history of SEC basketball, we are witnessing the greatest season constructed by any Division I conference ever. We fully expect that the SEC will have a record number of teams in the NCAA tournament. That number fluctuates from day to day. The competition level has been off the chart, and that's in large part due to the work of our guest speaker today. You know, Greg Sankey's done a lot of smart things as the SEC commissioner. One of the smartest was hiring Garth Glissman. Garth has an extensive history working in the NBA, in working from that post with college basketball. But maybe the coolest aspects of your resume are he's a Nebraska native, he is an attorney, he was a volunteer high school basketball coach, played football and basketball at the University of Nebraska, so he knows a little bit about being someone who cares about basketball in a state that sometimes shows a little more interest towards that other sport. He has, again, helped spearhead the growth of SEC basketball, which is at the peak that none of us has ever seen before. Please welcome, in today's guest speaker for the Alabama Power Series, Garth Glissman.
Well, thank you, Kevin, for the kind introduction. And if we want this ball, to be signed by somebody that would make it worth something, I'll take it back to the office and get Commissioner Sankey to sign it. So we can talk about that after the fact. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for the kind introduction. I'll hand this ball back to you. Special thanks to Dick Coffey for the introduction. Dick, I put on a coat and tie for you today. Didn't want to let you down. You're a classy guy. We're a little more casual at the SEC, but appreciate the invitation. About 18 months ago, my wife and I and our two young kids moved to Birmingham sight unseen. Until my very first day on the job with the SEC, I had never stepped foot in the state of Alabama. I grew up on a small farm outside of Lincoln, Nebraska. Early in my career, I worked as an attorney in Omaha, Nebraska, which is home of the College World Series in baseball, and about an hour from the farm where I grew up. And starting in law school and continuing while practicing law for a total of 8 seasons, I moonlighted as a volunteer head high school basketball coach at a small private school in my hometown of Lincoln, Nebraska. So when I heard all of the talk about the Alabama State High School Tournament, it brought back a lot of positive memories. The last year that I coached high school basketball, right before I took a job with the NBA, was the first time that as a player or coach, I had ever been involved in the state tournament in the state of Nebraska. And I can tell you that that remains one of the most special athletic accomplishments in my life. Was finally, after 11 years, 3 as a varsity player in high school and 8 as a coach, I finally got to participate in the high school state tournament in Nebraska. And I'd never been there as a player or as a coach, but I was a broadcaster, kind of moonlighted as a broadcaster, called a lot of high school football and basketball games. So feels right at home to be here in Birmingham, given the passion for high school and college sports. But never had been to the state of Alabama. In fact, when I interviewed in person for this job with Commissioner Sankey, we actually met at a hotel right off the Atlanta airport. And the NBA asked me to kind of finish out my tenure there, so I actually worked with the NBA through Friday and then flew down to Alabama on a Sunday. I should say I was scheduled to fly down to Alabama on Sunday and start work on Monday, but got delayed and actually didn't get to Birmingham until 6 a.m. before I reported to work on my first day on the job at 8 a.m. But took the job sight unseen because I got my wife's blessing that it would be okay to move somewhere that neither of us had ever been. But I did so out of my respect for the SEC, certainly have an appreciation for what the SEC means for college athletics. And as I mentioned, my belief that the values in the state of Alabama were similar to the values of my family, and certainly a love of sports and a love of college and high school sports are central to that. And Birmingham has been a wonderful home for us. The people have been welcoming and friendly. As you know, it's a great place to raise kids, and I've even been able to get back into coaching, this time as coach of my daughter's kindergarten girls basketball team. And I should say that our kindergarten girls basketball team's not having quite the season that the SEC is in men's basketball, but I've had a lot of fun, so much fun that I'm going to continue with the coaching bug and coach soccer in the spring. So it's going to be a quick transition from basketball to soccer. So thank you for welcoming my family and I with open arms. We are absolutely thrilled to be here. Birmingham is a wonderful home, and we hope to be here a long time. As Kevin so kindly noted, and that's a tough act to follow. This guy, I mean, he's got, not only does he have all the data, but all the charisma. But as Kevin noted, it's a special time to be associated with the SEC, particularly SEC basketball. We are in the midst of a historic season. To provide some context, and if you've heard these statistics before, please forgive me, but I like them, so they are worth repeating. The SEC won 89% of non-conference games this season, the highest winning percentage of any conference since the ACC in the 83-84 season. But that's back when the ACC was an 8-team league. We're doing it roughly a 90% clip in non-conference rate at a 16-team league. That's why it's safe to say it's never been done before in college basketball. Every team entering SEC play had a winning percentage of 75% or better. Again, first time that's happened since the ACC in the 83-84 season. During non-conference play, the SEC had a 59-19 record against teams from other power conferences. And I've noticed, because of the overlapping geography and maybe some of the basketball tradition in the ACC, that folks around here are proud of the fact that we finished 30-4 against the ACC, including a 14-2 showing in the SEC-ACC Challenge. The Big 12 Conference, as you know, has probably been the most dominant conference in the last 10 years. We were 14-2 against the Big 12 Conference. As many of you know, KenPom is the most trusted source for college basketball analytics. It's one of those metrics that you were referencing earlier, Kevin. The SEC's current KenPom rating, so not only does KenPom rank teams, but they also rank conferences. The SEC's current KenPom rating, the highest rating in KenPom history, and that dates back to the 96-97 season. So no season has been better for any conference during that time frame. And of the SEC's 16 teams, 14 have been ranked at some point this season in the AP Top 25 poll. The strength of the SEC was on display during the initial preview of the NCAA tournament bracket 2 Saturdays ago. That was the Saturday of the Auburn-Alabama game, which was the first 1 versus 2 matchup in SEC history. And in the initial preview of the bracket, and of course there's still some basketball to be played, so this isn't the final destination, but it's a good sign of where we're headed. SEC teams accounted for 3 of the 4 1 seeds, with Auburn as the top overall seed, Alabama as the second overall seed, and then Florida as the 4th number 1 seed. So 3 of the top 4 and 5 of the top 6. Tennessee came in as the highest ranked 2 seed. Texas A&M was the second ranked 2 seed. So 5 of the top 6 teams coming from the SEC, and 6 of the top 16 overall seeds, with Kentucky as a 3 seed. According to current projections, the SEC is likely to play somewhere between 11 to 13 teams in the NCAA tournament. 12 is the most likely outcome, according to our data analysts. The one thing I'll tell you is that we've reached that point in the system where in conference play it's a closed loop. And so let's say we maybe fall down a little bit in terms of the number of teams in the tournament, and say we end up with 11. Well, and the trade-off for that would be we would have teams with really high seeds, because that would mean the higher teams in the standings essentially won out. If we end up with, say, 12 or 13 teams in the tournament, that may mean that a few of our teams, the trade-off for that would be a seed or 2 lower for a few SEC teams that have dropped teams down the stretch to some of our bubble teams. If we place 12 teams in the tournament, that would be an all-time record. The prior record was set by the Big East in 2011. That's a prior iteration of the Big East, back when the Big East was a 16-team league. They had 11 teams make the tournament. So nice to hit 12. That would be a good mark to set an all-time record. 12 teams in the NCAA tournament would mark significant progress from roughly a decade ago. From 2013 to 2017, hard to believe, but over a 5-year stretch, the SEC averaged 3.8 teams per team, or per year in the NCAA tournament, and most of those years, 4 of the 5 years in fact, placed only 3 teams in the tournament. So far cry from just placing 3 teams in the tournament a decade ago. So what's behind this rise in SEC basketball? Well, it's not happening by accident, and it's not happening in a vacuum. Larger trends in the region and college sports have helped fuel this momentum. And as someone who, by my own admission, I'm a proud Birmingham resident now, but had never even been in the state, what I knew about Alabama is what I had researched and read over the years. And so one of the things that I noticed when I started looking at this opportunity is the enormous momentum impacting the region at a macro level. And the SEC's current momentum certainly reflects record levels of population and economic growth throughout the southeastern part of the country. We are competitive people down here. I've sensed that in the way we talk about sports and everything else. So given our competitiveness, you'll appreciate this stat. For the first time in American history, in recent years, the southeastern part of the United States, that is the states from Texas over to Florida, so the southeastern quarter of the United States, has contributed more to the nation's gross domestic product than any other region in the country. Traditionally, the Northeast, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, far outpaced every other part of the country. That's no longer the case. It's now the southeastern part of the country that is the country's primary economic driver. All that population and economic growth throughout the region, combined with increased interest in SEC schools from northern students, has led to record enrollment in SEC schools. Over the last 20 years, the SEC's total student population has increased by approximately 40%. And it's stats like this why there was a recent article in the Wall Street Journal titled, "Sorry Harvard, Everyone Wants to Go to College in the South Now." The SEC has also benefited from the financial rewards associated with all of the success in football. And I think that's one of the reasons why I feel such a natural connection to this job in Alabama, as I do come from a state that has a proud football tradition, but that never stopped us from cheering on our basketball team in the winter. And I think both can be true. You can be really proud of your success as a state in football and basketball. And in the SEC, a rising tide has lifted all ships. And the success that came from football has boosted enrollment, and in turn has allowed many SEC institutions to invest more seriously in basketball over the last decade. Of course, anyone who follows the SEC knows that we have been the beneficiaries of very strong leadership at the conference office over the last 10 to 15 years, and even before that. My boss, Commissioner Greg Sankey, widely regarded as the most powerful man in college sports, and he has that swagger and also this learnedness, and someone who I admired for so long before getting this job. Had never met him, had just studied him, and he was one of the big reasons why I was so excited about coming to work for the SEC. And I see Ed Myerson in the back, and Ed, for good reason, you'd be upset with me if I didn't mention your dear friend, the late Mike Slive, who was absolutely part of a transformational history in the Southeastern Conference life history. And what I would tell you is I'm relatively new to Birmingham, but I can't tell you how many times I go around town, and I'm not one to broadcast I work for the SEC, but people might find out I'm wearing an SEC hat or SEC logo. And too many times to count, I've run into people, everybody from the cashier, running the counter, to important people like you, Ed, and everything in between, who have had their lives touched by Mike Slive. So never had a chance to meet Mike, didn't have a chance to work with Mike, but certainly he left a lasting impact, not only throughout the SEC, but in Birmingham, and Commissioner Sankey has done everything to carry on that legacy. And as I said, just as an outsider who studied the conference, the more I got to know about Greg Sankey and watched him and observed his leadership, I thought that's a guy that would be pretty neat to work for, and sure enough, the opportunity presented itself. Thinking about those macro trends, last but not least, the passion for college sports in this part of the country provides a massive advantage for our conference. When you look at some other conferences across the country, including power conferences, you see empty seats, you don't see nearly the same amount of enthusiasm. So it's a competitive advantage for our schools when they're going out and recruiting, that recruits know they're going to show up to a campus that cares immensely about college athletics. In addition to these macro considerations, there's a number of basketball-specific factors working in the SEC's favor, starting with the quality of head coaches in our league. We have big, dynamic personalities coaching in the SEC. In fact, I was so impressed, Heath, Mr. Heath Harmon from the High School Activities Association, with your message on sportsmanship, that I'm thinking we may need to have you come in and give a little reminder of sportsmanship to some of our coaches. Because that passion can sometimes manifest itself on the sideline. And we have I like to call them alphas. We got some alphas in the head coaching room. And even though they could use some sportsmanship reminders from time to time, I love them. Big reason why I took the jobs I knew working with them would make me better. We're talking about coaches like John Calipari, Rick Barnes, Bruce Pearl. These are either current or surefire Hall of Famers. Add to the list other coaches who have led a team to the Final Four: Chris Beard, Nate Oates, Porter Mosier, and then up-and-comers like Todd Golden, Mark Pope, Dennis Gates. In total, 6 of the SEC's 16 head coaches have led a team to the Final Four at this point in their career, and 3 more have led a team to the Elite Eight. No other conference can compare to those statistics. Another basketball-specific factor driving the SEC's recent success is the NIL opportunities. And that, of course, ties back to the economic growth in the region and the fact that in the southeastern part of the United States, we've been more quick to embrace NIL than some other conferences. Closely related to NIL is effective use of the transfer portal. The best players in the SEC this season are overwhelmingly transfers. Players like Janai Broome and Chad Baker-Mazara at Auburn, Mark Sears and Grant Nelson at Alabama, Walter Clayton and Elijah Martin at Florida, and Chaz Lanier at Tennessee. Notably, this group of players all has a number of factors in common. First, they all started their college careers at much smaller college programs. Janai Broome at Morehead State, Mark Sears at Ohio, Grant Nelson at North Dakota State, Walter Clayton at Iona, and so on. Currently, they're all in their 5th year of playing college basketball, and that's made possible due to the NCAA's COVID rule. Used to be, when I was in college, you only got 4 years to play. All of these student athletes, they're not only in their 5th year on a college campus, they're in their 5th year of actually playing. And also, they opted not to pursue the NBA or the G League. And I can tell you, having worked on the other side of this at the NBA, that the trends on this have completely flipped. Up until about 2016, 2017, college basketball was losing players in droves to the NBA and G League. College coaches were worried about the G League taking all of their players. That is completely flipped because of NIL. These players that I mentioned, many of them, I believe, will have a chance to go on and have successful careers in the NBA. But in terms of looking at the probabilities of it, they made a sound financial decision by coming back to college, playing another year or 2 of college, and getting the sure thing that is the NIL relative to the uncertainty that declaring for the NBA draft would have resulted in. Due to the new rules regarding roster building, a program, for better or worse, can completely reconstruct its roster from one season to the next. Take Mark Pope at Kentucky, a projected 3 seed, as I mentioned. He got the job at his alma mater, did not inherit a single returning scholarship player. Not far behind, John Calipari at Arkansas, Mark Byington at Vanderbilt, each retained 1 scholarship player. So for better or worse, the volatility is a part of the new era of college basketball. It can be dramatic at times, and there can be some significant fluctuations that you wouldn't have seen in the era of a Wimp Sanderson, where the roster build is something that happens more gradually over time. Take Dennis Gates at Missouri. In his first season, Missouri made the 2nd round of the NCAA tournament. Last season, Missouri went winless. This season, it's been a resurgent year for Coach Gates. They're 20-7 overall, 9-5 in SEC play, and they're now one of these trendy teams to be a Sweet 16 pick. Now, all of these changes have been good for the SEC this season. That's undoubtedly true based on the statistics that Kevin cited, that I rehashed. But given the pace of change in college athletics, we need to remain nimble and vigilant to sustain our success going forward. And so for us, that means success competitively. It also means success in terms of our ability to optimize fan interest. So we're monitoring a couple topics that will be important in shaping the future of college athletics in the short and medium term. The first is revenue sharing. And I know we have at least one former lawyer here, Ed, so if you have other lawyers here who've been tracking this, you know that the House case, that is the litigation that likely will shape the future of college sports governance. And if that case, which is essentially had a preliminary settlement agreed upon, if that settlement is approved by the court this summer, it will take effect with the next school year, and that will result in revenue sharing, so direct payments from athletic departments to student athletes. How revenue is allocated to men's basketball student athletes will be important to monitor. Different schools and different conferences likely will allocate different levels of funding to men's basketball. And given the SEC's historic emphasis on football combined with the hard spending cap, this isn't a soft cap, this is a hard cap fixed at 22% of athletic department, an average athletic department revenue. Some SEC coaches are concerned about the level of funding for men's basketball programs compared to basketball first schools, so to speak. I won't mention any schools in our conference that are basketball first or football first, but think of a Kansas, right? So how is Kansas going to allocate revenue going forward? So there's some concern about how we compete with basketball first schools. There's also some concern about how we compete with basketball first conferences. So you think about the Big East, you think about the Atlantic 10. Now, is the Atlantic 10 really a threat to pick off players from the SEC? Probably not, but the Big East, certainly competitive enough, and if the economics change, that's something that our coaches in the conference office are monitoring closely. Next topic is scheduling, both at the national level and in the SEC. And given my mutual love of both basketball and football, I'm very mindful of the fact that as the NFL and college football continue to expand their seasons, think about this past college football season, went into the third week of January. That is infringing upon the time of year that traditionally was priority for college basketball. It used to be you had bowl games end on January 1, and then college basketball got about 10 weeks before March Madness and then owned the month of March and into early April. That's changing as both the NFL and college football are expanding their seasons. We need to work harder in an increasingly distracted society. We need to work harder to capture the attention of our fans, and we need to do that earlier in the season. But we can't do that earlier in the season by going head-to-head with football. From a rating standpoint, that would not be a wise strategy. But we have to be selective. Look at the calendar. What's the NFL doing? What's college football doing? And where can we strategically find windows that make sense? Due to a new NCAA rule change that I helped initiate as a member of the NCAA Men's Basketball Oversight Committee, there will be more high-profile exhibition games next year between Division I programs. That will help people get to thinking about college basketball earlier than they might otherwise. But of course, we need to think much bigger than exhibition games. One area where college basketball needs to improve is opening night and opening week. College basketball, this is objectively true, has the softest opening night and softest first few nights of the season of any major sport in America. In the last two seasons, the number of games, the first 2 or 3 nights of the season, among 2 power conference schools, forget nationally ranked power conference schools, just 2 power conference schools at all, was low single digits combined in both years. That stands in stark contrast to the way the NFL opens its season. You always have the defending Super Bowl champion on Thursday. This year they played a game in Brazil on Friday night between the eventual Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles against the iconic Green Bay Packers. Lead into your traditional Sunday opening, and then a doubleheader on Monday night. That's an opening night, opening weekend with a punch. College football has an opening weekend, Labor Day weekend with a punch. College basketball has been the opposite. And so this is something that I'm focused on both in my capacity as a member on the Men's Basketball Oversight Committee, but also my work with the SEC. I will tell you this is a difficult problem to solve because non-conference scheduling is a byproduct of the decentralized nature of college basketball scheduling. I see Chris Nix, you know that world all too well, right? Trying to get two teams to play together in the non-conference. It's like you got to check like 12 different boxes to make it happen. Coaches are very particular about who they want to play and when they want to play them. So this is not going to be an easy task. There's not any simple solutions, but it's something that college basketball has to be focused on, and we have to improve. We have to work harder to capture the attention of our fans. We're trying to do our part in the SEC to honor our fans, to get you engaged in SEC men's basketball. We're not perfect. I'll be the first to admit that. But scheduling is important. Whether I was at the NBA or the SEC, scheduling is probably the most important lever available to any league office to market its product. That said, it's a delicate balance on one hand between maximizing fan interest and traditional rivalries, and on the other hand, maintaining competitive equity and trying to keep the coaches happy who are primarily focused on competitive considerations. On the fan interest side, one point of emphasis for us this year in the SEC has been playing big-time games on Saturday. I'm really proud of our schedule this year, particularly on Saturdays. That's why both Alabama and Auburn games are on a Saturday. This season, for the first time in several years, we think that's been wonderful for interest in the SEC. 2.8 million people watched Alabama versus Auburn on February 15th. That was the most watched SEC game in the last 6 years, and reports are that it was good for the local economy in Tuscaloosa. The same is true for other rivalry games. It's not just about, at the SEC, we live in Birmingham, but we have to, our loyalty runs to all 16 schools, so it's not just Auburn and Alabama that we're trying to showcase on Saturdays. The same is true for Ole Miss and Mississippi State, both of those games on a Saturday. That means a lot to the state of Mississippi. Texas A&M, both games on a Saturday. That means a lot to the state of Texas, as that once iconic rivalry has been restored with Texas joining the SEC. Get a lot of questions on the SEC's scheduling format, even I'll say some criticisms and fair criticisms. Currently, the SEC is a 16-team conference that plays 18 regular season games. That inherently makes for an unbalanced schedule. This season, the SEC is the only power conference that plays 18 regular season conference games. Every other power conference is playing 20 regular season conference games this year. Now, as it turned out, that worked out really well for us because we went out and got some more non-conference games, padded our non-conference statistics, whereas once you're in conference play, no matter how good you are, you have a 500 record by definition. But similar to the debate in football, 8 versus 9 games, 18 versus 20 games, there's this inherent tension between playing more conference games to give fans the rivalries that they want to see versus the downside of scheduling too many losses. And so there's a delicate balance there. But as a result of this format, to give you some examples, Alabama fans this year, they don't get to watch Tennessee play in their building. Similarly, Auburn and Florida fans don't get to see Kentucky come to their building. And I hear from some of those fan bases, and that's tough. When you've seen Kentucky come to your building every year for many, many years, and all of a sudden, that only happens once every 2 years, that disappoints some fans. And so that's fair criticism. The one thing I would say is that when evaluating a schedule, it's important to look over a multi-year time horizon. With an unbalanced schedule, given the parameters of our existing conference schedule format, it's impossible to be perfect in 1 year, but things tend to even out over time. And what I would tell you to wrap things up is that at the conference office, we'll do everything we can to keep pushing the boundaries of what is expected for SEC men's basketball. I view my job as a service-oriented job. My job is to serve all of the stakeholders in the SEC, and that includes our incredible fans and supporters, the people in this room. I welcome your feedback. I think there's a lot to be said for transparency. I think I can learn from the people in this room. I think I can learn from everyone associated with the conference. So I welcome your emails, your suggestions. I've learned a lot from fans, and I could point to specific things in our schedule this year that are better this year than they were in my first year because of feedback that I received from our incredible fans. We'll continue to listen and learn. We'll iterate from one season to the next, constantly trying to improve. So that's my pledge to you. But in return, I do have a few things to ask of you. And that is that I would ask you to help us continue to spread the word about SEC basketball. Go to games if you can. If you can't go to games for whatever reason, watch us on TV and get your friends and family excited about SEC basketball. You all know it is an incredibly fun and compelling product, and we want you to help us spread the word. Within this iconic conference that is the SEC, SEC basketball remains this sliver of a growth story. Our best days are still ahead, and I'm very thankful to be with you in Birmingham and part of the journey. So thank you, and happy to open it up to questions. Yes, sir. I hope so. The reason why I say that is I think it's a better system for all involved if, on one hand, student athletes can benefit in some of the financial rewards, but also the system has more structure and order. And if you look in pro sports, you have much more order to the overall system in the sense that you have multi-year contracts. You have an orderly system to player movement. So in the NBA, for example, players can once they've earned the right to be in free agency, they can shift from one team to the next, but they can't start negotiating with teams until after the conclusion of the NBA season. It's not like in college football or college basketball where in the middle of the postseason, you have the backup quarterback on a team that makes the semifinal of the college football playoff enter the transfer portal because he feels he has no choice financially but to do so. And that's the problem is that pro sports, largely through the collective bargaining agreement, have been able to impose structure and order on their sports that don't currently exist in college athletics. So hopefully through the settlement, perhaps some congressional intervention at the federal level, now that student athletes are able to benefit economically, policymakers, legislatures, courts can recognize that we all benefit from some more structure. And when college athletics can get more structure, everybody will benefit. And I think, frankly, student athletes will benefit. I don't think it's in the best interest of student athletes to be attending 3 or 4 different colleges. For one, it's going to be disruptive to their educational journey. And then also, who are their friends going to be when they're done with college? Who's going to be in their wedding? What's their professional network going to look like when they're done playing? It used to be when I was a student athlete, again, I wasn't a very good student athlete, but the trade-off was for 4 or 5 years, you're going to make economic sacrifices. You basically can't enjoy any of the immediate economic benefits. But in exchange, you're going to have this network of alums that are going to provide you with professional opportunities for the rest of your life when you're done playing in college. And now for these student athletes that are at 3 or 4 different colleges, my question is, what are we teaching them about the importance of pushing through adversity? What does that mean for their college experience? Because I too believe in education-based athletics. What does it mean to anyone's college experience if you've gone to 3 or 4 different colleges and at the end of the day you're probably just taking the major that allows you to graduate the quickest rather than trying to actually fulfill a genuine academic journey? And then when it's all said and done and you need somebody to turn to as a friend or somebody to turn to for professional networking, where are you going to turn? So my hope is that we get to a system where there's much more order, but there aren't any immediate solutions on the horizon. So it might be more of a medium-term goal as opposed to short-term. Yes? How much time do we have? Okay. Mr. Coffey tells me we have 10 minutes to talk about officiating. I'll try to maybe keep it to 5 or less so we can get to 1 or 2 more questions. College basketball officiating is an inherently difficult endeavor. I will compare it to the NBA because I spent 7.5 years there. So at the NBA, the referees are all full-time NBA employees. And with that comes all of the training and development and evaluation processes that you would expect as a full-time employee of any sophisticated organization or corporation. In college basketball, because of the decentralized nature, all men's basketball referees are independent contractors. And they are all incentivized to try to maximize their earnings. So as a consortium, and by the way, the SEC oversees an officiating consortium that manages the officials for 9 of the 31 Division I conferences. A lot of folks may not realize that. So we don't just supervise our own officials, we supervise and assign the officials for 9 of the 31 Division I conferences, including other conferences like Conference USA, ASUN, the American, Southland, Ohio Valley, you name it. The problem is, because they're independent contractors and it's in our financial best interest not to make them employees because it limits our costs, when they're not working in our consortium, the best officials are going to work in other consortiums every night because they're rational economic actors who are trying to maximize their own earnings. You can't really fault them for that. So it's not uncommon at all that, there have been instances this year. I was watching the UConn-St. John's game the first time they played in UConn. Friday night, I see an SEC official calling that game on Friday night, and he was calling a big SEC game the next day. One of our best officials called the Alabama-Kentucky game on Saturday, called the Indiana-Purdue game on Sunday. That's commonplace. These guys are working 6 or 7 nights a week, again, because of their financial interests. So a lot of people go to, okay, well, why don't you just make them full-time employees? Well, the best officials, net are probably clearing in excess of $200,000 a year. But they also have all the autonomy that comes with being an independent contractor, meaning they're clearing $200,000 as a men's basketball official, but they can do whatever they want financially with the rest of their time. So many of them are small business owners. Many of them have other side jobs. One famous referee from Omaha, Nebraska had a roofing company. For those of you who follow Kentucky basketball, you know where I'm going with that. And so the point is not to make these, to incent them to become full-time employees. Not only would you have to pay them $200,000, but you would also have to pay them or be willing to accept some of the trade-offs with respect to their other outside employment. So the numbers just don't make sense. And I looked at this issue in great detail. Even the NFL does not have full-time referees. Essentially, the only professional sports leagues that have full-time referees are the leagues that play games virtually every night of the week. And that creates a scheduling density that allows for economies of scale to take place such that it's in the best interest of the league to essentially say we want to make you a full-time employee and accept all of the economic burdens that are associated with that. So if you're in this world of having independent contractors, 1099s, and having limited control over them, you then have to accept the fact that they're going to go work for other conferences. You then have to accept the fact that they're going to be somewhat limited in terms of the training and evaluation processes that they're willing to go through to referee in the SEC, because if you're too hard on them, they'll go to the Big Ten. It's a competition for talent just like any other industry. Another layer on top of that is that although we oversee 9 of the 31 Division I conferences in our consortium, and other conferences oversee a smaller number of conferences in their consortium, the selection of officials for the NCAA tournament is done at the national level. So there's a disconnect between oversight of officiating for all regular season games and what happens in the NCAA tournament. So there's multiple layers to this decentralized and frankly, I'll put it in a politically correct term, it's suboptimal. It's not how you would design it if you were trying to get the best officiating results. But in a world where our schools are more focused on economics than ever before, don't expect us to make referees full-time employees anytime soon. Did I answer your question at all? I am trying to do everything I can to bring the NBA's data-driven review process to the SEC. But what I can tell you is that data analysts and data-driven software products are expensive, and the SEC doesn't have the NBA's budget. So I'm trying to do the best I can based on the resources available to us to bring a level of rigor that I've seen at the professional levels to the SEC. But I'd ask you to bear with me because, as I mentioned, I operate within a certain set of constraints, including economic constraints. And we're in a very competitive battle for talent as it relates to our officials, and we're also resource constrained as it relates to our ability to deploy resources to try to get incrementally better at officiating. Yeah, they'll be signing contracts with their schools. So I wasn't nearly the accomplished lawyer that the esteemed gentleman in the back, Ed Meyerson, is, but I practice in commercial law. And we would have corporate clients come to us and they would be upset with their, the opposing party on a contract didn't perform certain terms. And ultimately, the only way to enforce private contracts is you have to have a client who's willing to sue. So where I'm going with that is you're darn right the schools are going to ask the student athletes to sign contracts. But what school is going to be the first to sign up and sue a student athlete for a breach of contract and take all of the PR ramifications associated with that? The only way to enforce a private contract is litigation. And so student athletes to date have benefited from a system where external forces, namely courts and legislators, have continuously struck down existing rules and regulations on antitrust grounds, and then you have some schools and collectives that may have some private contractual remedies available to them, but to date nobody's been willing to put their name on a lawsuit and try to hold a student athlete accountable for a breach of contract. So it's actually somewhat of a counterintuitive policy proposal. And I say it's counterintuitive because I think there's widespread recognition that we have a problem on our hands with respect to student athletes in their 7th, 8th, and sometimes 9th year of eligibility. That's not really what college sports was intended to be. So how do you get to a world where student athletes are routinely in their 6th and oftentimes in their 7th year of eligibility? Rare cases, 8 and 9. You get there, number one, with the COVID year, which will phase itself out relatively soon. But more than anything, you get there with a series of waivers, typically for season-ending injuries, but other waivers maybe for mental health or extenuating circumstances. So you have the COVID year layered on top of a bunch of waivers and then additional court rulings that might grant former junior college student athletes with additional eligibility. And so the thought is, again, in somewhat of a counterintuitive way, to bring college athletics back to its roots of competition between 18 to, say, 23-year-olds, that you would enact a new eligibility rule where it's 5 for 5, and essentially you can do whatever you want within those 5. You can play all 5, you can not play, but you're not going to get credit for a red shirt. But at the end of those 5 years, you're done. And the proponents of the 5 for 5 want to pair that 5 for 5 with a system where essentially there are no waivers, no red shirts, no exceptions. And so on the surface, it seems like you'd be extending eligibility. In practice, the effect is you would ideally return college athletics to its more natural roots of 18 to 23-year-olds. And one comment that my boss has said publicly recently, so I can't take credit for it, but understand that anytime a student athlete is getting a 6th or 7th year of eligibility, that is coming at the expense of an 18 or 19-year-old. Because college coaches I talked about referee incentives, apparently not in a very satisfactory way, but at least I was being honest. Coaches' incentives are to win, because if they don't, they're going to be held accountable in terms of losing their job. So we can't expect coaches to necessarily act as statesmen, right? They're following their individual incentives. So if there's a 6th-year student athlete versus an 18-year-old kid right out of high school, outside of those really highly touted high school recruits, you're going to in most cases go to that 24-year-old who can help you win now. So that's what the 5 for 5 is intended to address. The NCAA recently issued some guidance that it won't occur next year. They haven't given any odds one way or the other as to whether it will ever be implemented, but it would be no sooner than the 26-27 academic year. I'm not saying that it will happen in 26-27, I'm just saying definitively the status quo until then. Yes? Well, if the House settlement is confirmed by the court, in effect, there will be a salary cap, and the salary cap will come in the form of a hard cap in terms of what athletic departments can allocate to student athletes across all sports at their school. Now, there will be debate on campuses as to how to allocate money from one sport to the other, and there will be debate within each coaching staff as to how to allocate revenue within each team, but there will be a hard cap. Questions still remain as to how outside NIL will be enforced, because under the new settlement, there's still an opportunity for NIL earnings for student athletes so long as it's consistent with fair market value. But exactly what fair market value means and how that's enforced, time will tell. Yes, sir. I feel fortunate in the sense that I got 7.5 years of incredible training at the NBA to deal with those types of complaints. And the NBA, 30 teams, 82 regular season games, playoff series, 4 rounds of 7. So I got a ton of reps. And so it's no different than when we got complaints from teams in the NBA. So of course, if schools submit plays for us to review, we have to look at it. And sometimes they have a point. And what we try to focus on is systemic issues or patterns. If a referee just misses a call, it's kind of like a player missing a shot. Those things happen from time to time. You can't expect perfection. But what we're trying to do is identify patterns. And that does happen. It's a lot of working at a league office. Forgive me for the lawyer analogies, but when you think about our system of justice in the United States, you think of a traditional case with 2 parties, prosecuting attorney, defense lawyer, like you have both sides kind of making their case to a judge, and the judge, there's an advocacy that's built into the system because there's an understanding that nobody can represent the interests of their client better than the client and the lawyer acting on the client's behalf. And the same is true for sports, in the sense that if a team has been aggrieved or a team is being systematically disadvantaged in the way they're officiating, there's nobody that's going to understand that more quickly or more thoroughly than the school. So we welcome that input from the schools, and then my job is to try to filter through that and make sense of what is objectively a legitimate issue versus what is kind of an idiosyncratic gripe that is not a systemic issue. So that's essentially the art of league office work, is trying to make sense out of what is legitimate criticism and what is not. And maybe to get back to this gentleman's question on officiating, one of the things that I look very closely at is the data. So if we get a complaint from a school about, this should have been a foul, okay, well, the foul count in the game actually was in your favor. You shot X number more free throws than the other team. So, okay, you might be right on this play, but it's not like the referees had some systemic bias against your team. And then we look at other factors to make sure that we can kind of understand from a data standpoint and have a degree of confidence that all 16 schools are getting a fair shake from our officials. Yes, sir. Well, I'm very sympathetic to your underlying points. You know, going back to my 8 years as a high school coach, I'm the son of an educator. My mom was a 40-plus year public school teacher. So I think philosophically, you and I are probably very much aligned. Historically, in college athletics, the student athlete services have been deployed at the campus level. So it's not necessarily the job of the conference office to determine the best way to develop student athletes. Our job is more governance related and setting kind of a level playing field. Certainly, we can play a role in setting the overall kind of tone of the conference and investing in student athletes, but ultimately those decisions as it relates to funding and the programming are made at the campus level. And I agree with you that there are some concerns with respect to, you have, young minds, 18 to 23, you combine that with money that they probably, never dreamed of seeing at that age. But you'd be amazed how much of what's happening in college athletics today is beyond the control of the conference office and beyond the control of schools. Because essentially where we are now is the result of litigation and state legislatures. So hopefully, if through some combination of the settlement and a nationalized framework, we can put some more order around the system and then begin to think more systematically about the rules that are helpful for the overall structure of sports and the development of young people. Right now, unfortunately, those rules don't really exist, and so those decisions, both in terms of funding and programming, are left entirely to the campuses. I probably passed my 10 minutes, right? I may never get invited back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Garth. That was terrific, and we appreciate you giving us so much of your time there. And just remind everybody again, next week, March 3rd, Greg Byrne, Martin Newton, Charles McClellan, the NCAA Men's Basketball Committee, and we'll grill them on what they're going to do on Selection Sunday. So we will see you then.